AITAH for basically telling my in-laws this is my house, if you don't like my rules, get out. First off, I don't think I was wrong, which has infuriated my girlfriend. So I 25 and recently moved into my first ever house. Not a rental, not a temporary setup, not a shared flat, but my own place. Bought with my own savings, blood, sweat, and patience. It took me years to get here, grinding at a job I didn't always love, skipping vacations, turning down nights out, just so I could one day walk into a space and say, "This is mine." And finally, I did it. I bought the house. Naturally, I wanted to celebrate the moment. Not with anything massive or showy, but with a simple, meaningful housewarming. Just close people. My girlfriend, 27F, her family, my mom, and a few good mates. I set up an outdoor area in the garden with lights, chairs, and a couple of folding tables. There was music playing low in the background, the smell of grilled food in the air, and that soft springtime evening glow that just makes everything feel good. Everything was going smoothly. People were laughing, catching up, sipping drinks. The kids had their own little table off to the side, juice cartons, crisps, finger food, and enough space for them to be kids without getting in the adults' way. Among the kids was my girlfriend's nephew. 8 years old, sweet-natured, well-behaved, and just trying to enjoy the evening like everyone else. He wasn't loud or disruptive. If anything, he seemed a bit nervous, like he didn't want to do anything wrong. Then it happened. The kind of moment every parent has seen 100 times. The boy reached for something across the table. I think it was a cup, or maybe a biscuit, and accidentally knocked over a jug of squash. A whole jug. It spilled across the table, dripping onto the grass, soaking a couple of paper plates, and splashing lightly on another kid's shoes. The second it happened, the boy froze. His face turned pale. He looked at me, then at the adults, and immediately said, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to." And he looked like he meant it, genuinely. You could see in his eyes that he was embarrassed, scared he was going to get in trouble. I smiled, waved it off, and said, "Hey, it's all right. Accidents happen, mate. It's just a bit of squash." I even laughed a little just to let him know it was okay. The mess wasn't even that bad. Nothing stained, nothing broken. Just a jug of diluted juice knocked over in a garden. No big deal. But the vibe shifted fast. Way too fast. Out of nowhere, his father came storming over. And I mean storming. Stiff posture, jaw clenched, that heavy fast walk that tells you someone's already angry before they even speak. What followed honestly caught me off guard. So there I am, standing near the kids' table, still holding a half-full plate and sipping my drink, trying to keep things light after the juice spill. I figured it was all done. A minor moment, kid said sorry, I laughed it off. No harm, no foul. But then he arrived. The boy's dad, my girlfriend's brother-in-law, walked over like he was about to deal with a criminal, not a child. I'd barely had time to react before his voice cut through the evening air. Not loud enough to cause a scene yet, but sharp, tense, coiled, aggressive in that quiet, dangerous way. "What the hell did you do now?" He snapped at his son, standing over him like a drill sergeant. The boy flinched, stammered something like, "It was an accident," eyes already glossing over with tears. But the dad wasn't hearing any of it. He launched into him right there, right then. "You don't pay attention. Every single time, you're the one who causes trouble. How hard is it to be careful?" I froze. I looked around. Surely someone would step in, right? But no one did. My girlfriend looked uneasy. Her mom seemed more focused on her plate than her grandson's tears. And her sister, the boy's mom, just watched, arms crossed. The father kept going, piling on the guilt, drilling this kid into the ground emotionally for spilling a damn jug of squash. The boy stood there, silent now, bottom lip trembling. You could feel the tension buzzing in the air like static before a storm. I cleared my throat and gently said, "Hey man, it was an accident. He already said sorry, it's no big deal." He didn't even look at me. He just replied, without turning his head, "This is between me and my son." Right then I felt it, that weight in my chest, that slow boil of frustration. This wasn't parenting, this was punishment, this was ego. And it was happening in my home, at a celebration, over something completely harmless. The boy finally broke and ran, actually ran, across the garden and hid near the hedge by the fence. Sat down, head in his hands, crying his heart out. And do you want to know the worst part? The father walked back to the main table like nothing happened. He didn't even flinch. And when he told the rest of the family what happened, his wife, the boy's mother, actually smirked and said, "Good. Let him sit there and think about what he did. He needs to learn." There was this weird, awkward little chuckle from a few of the family members, like his shame was some form of entertainment. I stood there stunned. I felt like I was in a different world, like I was the only one who saw how wrong this was. I couldn't believe this many adults could sit there and normalize this kind of treatment. For an 8-year-old, over a spilled drink, at a party. I didn't know what to say. I felt guilty, honestly. Like I should have done more in the moment. Should have raised my voice. But instead, I quietly walked over to where the boy was curled up on the grass, still quietly crying. He looked up at me when I approached. I knelt down beside him and said, "Hey, you okay?" He didn't answer at first, just sniffled. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a small bar of chocolate I had for the kids, and offered it to him. He took it like it was a treasure, held it in both hands, and then, through shaky breath, he said again, "I'm really sorry." That's when I taught him this little handshake. A silly old high-five trick I used to do as a kid. He smiled, just a little. That was the moment I knew I couldn't let this slide. Not here. Not in my home. Not with a kid who did nothing wrong. And that was the beginning of the real storm. I watched him, that little boy, slowly nibbling the edge of the chocolate bar like it was something forbidden, something he didn't deserve. His eyes kept glancing back at the table, like he was scared someone would take even this small comfort away from him. And that did it. That was the final spark. I stood up, brushed off my hands, and took a long look at that table full of so-called grown-ups. Smiling, chatting, sipping drinks like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Not to me. I turned and saw her, his mother, walking toward us. Her face was tight, cold, no softness, no concern. She stopped a few feet away and said, without even a hint of warmth, "Do you mind not talking to my son? He needs to sit here and think about what he did wrong." I stared at her for a second. At first, I thought she was joking. I waited for the punchline, the roll of the eyes, the just kidding. But it never came. Instead, I saw a woman who truly believed this was discipline, that shame and isolation were parenting, and that treating her own son like this made her a strong parent. I took a breath, slow and deep, and motioned for her husband to come over. No yelling, no big scene, just firm, controlled, serious. "I need to talk to both of you," I said. They followed me a few steps away from the crowd, under the patio light, right beside the sliding glass door to the house. And then I said it. I didn't plan it. It just came out the way it needed to. This is my house. If you want to treat your kid like that, don't do it here, not on my property, not at my celebration. And if you've got a problem with that, you can leave. Right now. Their eyes went wide, like they couldn't believe I'd just spoken to them like that. But I didn't flinch. I held the line. "You think I'm telling you how to parent?" I continued. "I'm not. I'm telling you that I won't stand by and let a child be humiliated in my own backyard over something so small. You want to scold him? Do it respectfully. But if you're here to punish and bully, you can find the exit." The silence that followed was like a vacuum. Everything around us just stopped. The sound of forks clinking on plates in the background. The gentle murmur of conversations. Even the wind seemed to still for a moment. The father crossed his arms and said something like, "We'll raise our son how we see fit." I said, without backing down, "Then raise him somewhere else." That was it. That was the match strike. They turned around, stormed back toward the table, whispering loud enough for others to hear. The words, unbelievable, disrespectful, rude host, all thrown into the air like confetti. But I didn't care. My mother, bless her fierce heart, overheard it, and, in typical fashion, didn't hold her tongue. Loud and clear, she said, "Well, I raised a son who knows the difference between discipline and cruelty. Maybe some people could learn from that." Boom. That statement hit the table like thunder. You could see it on everyone's face. Shock. Tension. The line had been drawn, and I wasn't the only one standing on it. From that point on, the atmosphere shifted. Her family kept exchanging glances, little whispers, passive-aggressive comments. It was like I had suddenly become the villain for protecting a crying child. But you know what? I didn't feel like the villain. I felt like someone who finally said what needed to be said, who stood up when no one else would. And yet, even as I stood tall, heart pounding, mind racing, I knew something had cracked. Not just with them, but with her. With my girlfriend. The evening dragged on like a storm that refused to pass. Laughter tried to fill the air again, but it was hollow, brittle. Like everyone was pretending they hadn't just watched a fault line split open in the middle of our backyard. I stayed with the boy for a while longer. We kicked a ball back and forth, nothing serious. Just enough to see the sadness ease off his face. Just enough to see him smile again. My mate joined in with his own son, and for a little while, it felt like we were building something pure again. Something untouched by all the adult bitterness that lingered nearby. Then the boy did something that caught me off guard. He hugged me. Tight. Like he needed to feel safe. Like I had done something no one else had ever done for him before. I froze for a second. I'm not a hugger. Never have been. But I let it happen. Because in that moment, it felt like the most honest thing that had happened all day. He whispered, "I'm sorry again." Like he still carried guilt for that tiny accident. I whispered back, "You've got nothing to be sorry for, little man." But while that small moment felt warm, what came after it did not. I walked back to the table where my girlfriend was waiting. Her arms crossed, her jaw tight. She gave me a look I hadn't seen before, a mix of disappointment and disbelief. "Can we talk in private?" she said through clenched teeth. I nodded. We stepped inside the house, closed the sliding door, and stood in the kitchen, away from the whispers and judgmental eyes outside. "What the hell was that?" she said, barely keeping her voice down. "That was me standing up for a kid who was being treated like dirt," I replied calmly. "They're my family," she said. "You can't just talk to them like that." I looked her in the eye and said, "They're guests in my house." I didn't insult them. I set a boundary. And honestly, I expected you to back me up, not scold me. She shook her head, clearly hurt. "You embarrassed them. You made a scene. You made me look bad." That stung. That's when I said something I regret. Not because I didn't mean it, but because of how deep it cut. I think less of you for asking me to apologize. You watched that boy cry like he was worthless, and your concern is about their feelings? Her face twisted, not in anger, but in something deeper. Sadness. Maybe confusion. Maybe both. Do you even want a future with me? She asked quietly. I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because the realization was setting in. Her silence when the boy cried. Her loyalty to those who belittled him. The growing distance between what I stood for and what she stood by. I don't know, I said truthfully. Because right now, I don't know who you are when it really matters. There it was. The crack. The one that had always been there, but we'd both painted over until now. Outside, the party limped along. People left in pairs, the goodbye hugs forced, the smiles tight. Her parents didn't even look at me when they left. My mom stayed behind a little longer, helped clean up. She didn't say much, just gave me a nod. The kind of nod that says, you did good, even if it cost you. Later that night, lying on the couch alone, I stared at the ceiling. That simple accident, a jug of water, had revealed something far bigger. Values, character, what you protect, and what you allow. I didn't regret standing up for the boy, but I was starting to realize I might have lost more than I expected by doing it. The house felt different the next morning. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, like even the walls were holding their breath, waiting for someone to speak first. I made coffee like I always did, but the sound of the mug hitting the counter felt louder than it should have. Like even the simplest things had turned awkward. She didn't come out of the bedroom right away. And when she finally did, her eyes were tired. She hadn't slept well. Neither had I. We didn't greet each other. No morning, no kiss on the cheek, not even a nod. Just two people occupying the same space but living in different worlds. She sat down at the kitchen table and looked at me. We need to talk, she said softly. I leaned against the counter. I figured. There was a long pause before she finally spoke. You humiliated my family. I sighed. I didn't humiliate anyone. I protected a kid, your nephew. And you know I did the right thing. Her eyes watered slightly, but she didn't let them fall. It's not about right or wrong. It's about how you did it. You embarrassed them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lose my temper. But my words came out sharp. And they embarrassed themselves. All I did was draw a line. She leaned back, arms folded like she was building a wall between us. You don't understand how they are. That's just how they discipline. You don't get to change that. I looked at her carefully, seriously. And I'm telling you, if that's the kind of environment you're okay with, especially around kids, then yeah, maybe I don't get it. Because I don't want that around my future kids. Her face dropped. There it was. The truth neither of us had wanted to say out loud. The kind of truth that can't be unsaid. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and anger. So, what now? You want to break up over this? I walked over slowly and sat down across from her. I didn't rush my answer. I want to be with someone who shares my values, who protects the innocent, who doesn't excuse cruelty just because it's family. I don't want to raise a kid who's scared to spill a glass of water because they think they'll be punished for it. Her lip quivered. She looked away. You make me feel like I'm choosing between you and my family, she whispered. I'm not asking you to choose, I replied. I'm asking you to see what's right. That little boy was terrified, and no one stood up for him. Not even his own mother. Just me. That should mean something. The silence between us was louder than any argument, heavier than any fight. She stood up quietly and walked back toward the bedroom. No final words, no slamming doors, just distance. Deep, painful, unfamiliar distance. And I sat there, in the stillness, realizing something. Sometimes the biggest fights aren't loud. They're quiet. They're fought in silences, in glances, in choices. And right now, we were both losing. A few days passed. Not hours. Days. And in those days, nothing felt the same. She stayed at her sister's place. Said she needed time to think. I didn't argue. I needed time too, but for different reasons. I sat in that house, the one I dreamed of, the one I worked hard to earn. And all I could feel was a strange emptiness, the kind that creeps in after the storm has passed. Not because the noise is gone, but because you're not sure what's left standing. The little boy's face kept flashing in my mind. That quiet hug, that tight grip, like he needed someone to be on his side. And I kept thinking, if that's the kind of man I was in that moment, why does it feel like I'm being punished for it? Her silence hurt. But worse than that, I realized something deeper. This wasn't just about one incident. It was about what we were willing to accept in the people around us, what we were willing to overlook for the sake of peace. And me, I wasn't willing to overlook that. She finally came back. Same eyes, less fire, a different energy. She stood in the doorway for a moment before walking in. "I've been thinking," she said. I nodded. "Me too. I hate how everything exploded," she continued. "I hate that it turned into this, but I also can't pretend it didn't change how I see things." "Same here," I replied. She sat down across from me. It felt like a mirror of the last conversation. "You were right to protect him," she admitted. "I just wasn't ready to confront how wrong they were. It's easier to defend the people you've known your whole life than to accept they might be the problem." I looked at her. "I get that, but you also asked me to apologize for doing the right thing." She didn't deny it. She just looked down. "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared of tearing my family apart. Scared of facing what that meant. But after being away, I kept thinking about that boy, about how no one even hugged him. No one made it okay, except you." I stayed quiet. Let her speak. "You're the kind of man I should want to build a family with," she said. And I nearly let that go because I couldn't admit the truth. I exhaled deeply. "So what now?" She gave a soft smile, one that wasn't full of certainty, but full of honesty. "We start again, if you'll have me. No more excuses, no more silence." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I nodded. "Okay, but this time, we protect what's right, no matter who it offends." And just like that, the silence was gone, replaced with something new. Not perfect, not fixed, but honest. And in this world, that's more rare than anything. Sometimes doing the right thing makes you the villain in someone else's story. But that doesn't mean you stop standing for what's right. In a world that often stays silent, be the voice that protects the innocent, because one act of kindness can leave a mark on a child's heart forever. If this story moved you, even just a little, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more real stories that speak to the soul.